So today I thought I would maybe talk to you guys about likeness. That's something that, pretty much every employer experiences. And I've had a few questions actually about likeness and the process for terminating someone for likeness. So rather than just the process of dealing with it, people want to know that someone's employment can end for likeness. And actually, I want to make it clear that this process is actually the same process for likeness and absence, by the way. So if you have someone with regular short-term absence issues, this is the same kind of process, because I'm getting questions about both of those a lot at the moment, and people just feel, employers are just feeling a bit like they can't really do anything about it. And that isn't actually true. You're not stuck with this. So you would start by speaking to someone about their likeness. If they have regular likeness and it's standing out as in more than other people, you would talk to them about that. You would say, this isn't acceptable. You've been liked, 6 times in the last year, or 6 times in the last 6 months. That's not okay. That's not acceptable. And actually, we need you to improve your timekeeping. You need to turn up to work on time. Is there any underlying issues here? Is there any specific reasons why you're struggling to come to work? This is the bit, by the way, where things can go the other direction. So just want to be clear on that. If you are asking about, you need to be asking them what those underlying reasons might be for continuous lateness. The first time you talk to them, they might just say, no, there's no problem. I just overslept, whatever. Okay. But then you would follow this up with an advisory note to say, we discussed your timekeeping. You said that there is no underlying reasons for this. There's no specific reason for your likeness. You just overslept, and another time your car had an issue, and this and that and whatever. But you have that advisory note in place. If they then continue to be late, you do another meeting. This time you do an investigation meeting, and you repeat the conversation. But it starts with, we've spoken about this. I've already spoken to you about this. I've not seen an improvement in your timekeeping. You continue to be late. Why? Is there a reason? What is the reason for these last 3 latenesses? Why does this continue to be a problem? This is the point where they then sometimes come out with issues that might be the reason for this. Quite often we see mental health being a reason given for likeness, that people really struggle with getting out of bed. They struggle to get to work on time. Some people struggle with time blindness, those kind of things. And that's when those things come out. And then there is a conversation to be had around adjustments. What can we do to help you with this, and talking to them about adjustments. If you put adjustments in place and they continue to be late, you still continue the process. If they say, no, there's nothing, and let's say their lateness is with, I don't know, the dog ran out and this or that, and, it's completely unrelated things. Then after that first investigation meeting, so now they already have an advisory note, you're now that first investigation meeting, you'll probably follow that up with a disciplinary meeting. And a likely outcome at that point would be a warning, because they already have an advisory note, you've already spoken to about it, problem continues, you had an investigation, there's no real reason for it, you're now progressing to disciplinary. If you put adjustments in place, you wouldn't progress at this point to the disciplinary. You go again before you then get to that point. But if you've now progressed to disciplinary, you are likely looking at a warning at this point. Now, this is the bit where employers start to feel uncomfortable. because they're like, okay, but this guy's late like twice a week. Like, why can I only give him a warning? Surely this is gross misconduct. I can't tell you how much I hear that. No, it's not. It's not. It's misconduct. And it needs, timekeeping and absence is some of the few issues that really has to go through the stages, and you have to put in the work and you consistently have to do it to get to the end. So they now have a written warning. They continue to be late. Rinse and repeat the process. So do an investigation meeting. We've spoken about this. You have an advisory note. We gave you a warning about this after the last time we spoke. Why does this continue to be a problem? Is there any underlying issues? Honestly, it starts to feel like Groundhog Day. I get it. But you then go through the process. You then get the final written warning point. And then if they continue to be late, repeat the process, and that's when you get to dismissal. So is it a lot of work? Yes. You have to do the work consistently. You can't deal with their lateness when they're late, and then do nothing for 6 months after you've given them an advisory note, and then come to me and say, it's been late 12 times. 12 times. He has an advisory note. It's been like 12 times. You've done nothing. So it is consistent work. Once you start dealing with the lateness, you consistently need to deal with that to get through the process. Otherwise, if you say to me, yes, I gave him an advisory note for it last year, he's been late 12 times now, and I'm like, okay, so we're 14 months down the line, he's been late 12 times, you gave him an advisory note, you've done nothing in between. No, you can't now progress to disciplinary. We're going to need to back up a bit. So it's just about knowing that you have to go through this process 3 to 4 times, this investigation, disciplinary outcome. You need to do this 3 times, and you need to do it consistently, and then you can get a pretty clean dismissal outcome for lateness and absence. Like I say, it can go a little bit sideways at stages if there was underlying issues that came out and you needed to make some adjustments. But still, if they tell you what those issues are, you make adjustments, you put those adjustments in place, the timekeeping doesn't improve, you're continuing with your process. So, yeah, I wanted to let you guys know that you can do something about short-term absences and lateness. Is there any questions about that or anything else? Mal? Yeah.
Okay, so I got a couple of short things. So one of these things you may remember I've done before, but I need to revisit it. And that is and it's one of those awkward ones where you have a member of staff who smells of BO and generally is smelly. Okay. And so you've had the conversation. At the time, the excuse was, well, I have to walk to work and everything else. I said, well, bring a change of clothes, all this stuff, deodorant, whatever. And that was fine. And it's been the winter, so it hasn't really been as much of an issue. But I've noticed recently, and it's been brought to my attention by other people, one by somebody that was in the clinic, and also by, it's been mentioned by another member of staff, and it's becoming a problem again. So how do you revisit it again and make sure that this time it actually is sorted? Plus, on top of that, in the interim, this person has gone and got a dog, and often they're covered in dog hair as well as smelly. So it's really difficult because it's not the thing you want when you're seeing somebody clinically. So how can I deal with that?
Oh, that's such a nasty one to have to deal with. It's really nasty. And I'm sure we all at some point have had this really uncomfortable conversation with one of our employees. It is just a repeat, Mel. It's to say, I spoke to you about this before. It's creeping up again. It's a problem again. I am noticing it. It's been mentioned by some of your clients. It's been mentioned by some of the other staff. I'm also noticing that you have quite a lot of, animal hair on you. Clients could be allergic. There's from a cleanliness point of view, we need need to ensure, if you wanted to leave a few changes of clothes at work, you could do that. That's really it is just a repeat of the conversation again. And then this time, I think it should be followed up with an advisory note to say that we discussed this. Now, this advisory note is not it's not as harsh as an advisory note might be about other conduct issues. It'll probably be a little bit more gentle in terms of we talked about this.
Okay.
And it's just a note to say that we discussed this.
And how soon would you want that rectified? So in the note, would you say
immediately?
Right, it needs to improve immediately.
Yeah, you expect immediate improvement, and that's not just necessarily in the note; it's in the conversation.
Right. And can I actually say things? Because the thing is, I think, I made sort of gentle suggestions last time, but I don't think they were taken on board. There is potentially a cultural difference. So I don't know obviously you're not going to go into this sort of conversation, but I don't know if they shave their armpits or they use deodorant or that's a cultural thing or not. So it's really hard to know. But essentially, I feel like I want to say, you can change your clothes, bring some deodorant and leave it at work, this sort of thing. But I don't know if I'm in my rights to be able to tell them the advice on to how to do it. Surely it's common sense.
Wow. Common sense is such an open thing these days. I would not suggest making specific suggestions. For example, maybe you want to make sure your armpits are shaved. But I think you want to be clear that cleanliness is expected, especially, you could really lean into the fact that, we work in a medical profession. This is required. We work with clients that might be vulnerable, all sorts of things, vulnerable to health issues and all kinds of things. And we work closely with people. You're touching people's skin. Cleanliness really is very, very important. Daily cleanliness, and hygiene. And so alongside you can leave some deodorant and some changes of clothes at work if you feel that would help. You also kind of want to say that, daily hygiene is really important. And that maybe you could politely say that maybe that hygiene needs to be focused or, be done in the morning. Because like what might be happening is, this person might be having a shower at night when they get home, sleeping, sweating, whatever, and then getting up in the morning, walking their dogs, then going back, changing their clothes and walking to work. By that point, they've already got 12 hours of sweat on them.
Yeah.
So you might want to say that, maybe prioritize your hygiene. This is for the mornings so that you are nice and fresh when you come to work.
Thank you.
But I wouldn't go further than that into the how to have a bath kind of thing.
Okay, that's fine. My other quick query is a bit topical, actually, because we have somebody who's booked some holiday, but their plane may be disrupted and they may not be able to go. Now, the thing is, they're not going to know this until the last minute, and they've actually booked 4 weeks off. So we've had to adjust our work, and I've had to get people in to cover and all this, and I can't just stop that at a minute's notice. So what's the situation if somebody does that? Do they have to then still take that holiday, or how does it work?
I think it's about being reasonable from your point of view. If you have brought cover in, if you've booked and paid for someone to come and cover, and it's not something you can cancel last minute, because obviously you're not going to be able to. It's not reasonable of you to cancel someone the morning of or the day before to say, oh, we don't need you anymore. That person might be like, well, actually, now you need to pay me because I've turned down other clients. So I would say do what you can reasonably do. Take a reasonable approach to it. Say to her or him, look, if you're cancelling if your flight is, let me know as soon as your flight cancels and I'll see what I can do. At this point, your holiday is booked and it needs to be taken because I have brought in extra cover that I have booked. And if I now cancel that cover, then the business will incur costs.
Sure.
But you might be able to say to the person, I actually, maybe this person's holiday cancels a week before, and maybe you can say to the other person, I only need you for 2 weeks. I don't need you for 4. You could try and be reasonable.
Sure. Because this person is already on shorter hours because of the downturn in work. So they're already on shorter hours. So that was the other sort of thing, is they were going to go on holiday and I was going to try and increase work while they were away, but I don't think I'm going to be able to. So how long can you keep somebody on short time working, and can you reduce it even more than it currently is?
So if you have this person on short time working, then I would just say to them, look, I will reasonably look at what I can do about this holiday, but I've already kind of arranged cover, and I would just let them take their holiday because you really need them to at this point, right? Sure. Then the second question about short-time working. You can keep people on short-time working pretty much indefinitely. I know that's horrible, and it is a horrible thing to do, so please don't do it. But you can. You can keep people on short-time working for a really long period of time. However, people have the right, after 6 consecutive weeks on short-time working, or 4 consecutive weeks on short-time working, or 6 weeks in a 13-week period, they can request redundancy from you. So they can, and that redundancy is based on their full-time contract, not whatever part-time arrangement you've got in place at that stage. And they can request redundancy from you. And the only way that you can avoid that redundancy, the only way you can decline that redundancy, is by being able to offer them their normal working hours. I think it's for a period of 12 weeks. I'm going to have to check all of these.
Right. So if somebody asks for redundancy, does that cost you money?
Yes, because you'll have to make them redundant. You pay for redundancy.
And how's that calculated? Is that like a certain number of months or something? Or
yeah, so you can use an online redundancy calculator on .gov. Just put in redundancy calculator, use the .gov one, it's the best. And this will depend on a redundancy payment. It depends on how long they've been there, their age, how much they earn, and then it will calculate what you need to pay them in terms of statutory redundancy pay. And you will need to pay them notice, and you will need to pay them any accrued but unused holiday, and you will need to pay them their earnings up to the date that they are made redundant. And all of these things on their normal contract.
So what if the business doesn't have the money to pay that?
Then you need to give them the work. Like, I know it's a really difficult situation to be in.
It is, because if you haven't got the work, that's why you're in that situation. And then if you have to do the redundancy, you haven't got the money because you haven't got the work.
I understand that.
So if you then gave them, so let's say they've been on short-time working for 4 weeks, and you then gave them a couple of weeks full-time, and then you went back to short-time, does that count?
Yes, because then you're going to fall into the over a 13-week period bracket.
Right. What a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, if you calculate it really well, you can manage it. There is some science to it if you sit down and or there is some math to it, you may rather say. If you sit down and you work it out well, you can stretch it as long as you can, but inevitably if they're on that for quite some time, you are going to end up in a position where they have the right to request that redundancy. Now, I have to ask you if this person has been there 2 years, because if they haven't, okay. So if they haven't, they don't get statutory redundancy. But Mel, if you're at this point and the person hasn't been there 2 years, just let them go.
I can just say to them, we don't have the work. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you go.
Well, you and I should talk about this offline a little bit more, because I will ask you about other staff and other hours in that situation, so that you don't end up in a discrimination claim. But, yes, if you have got to the point where you do not have the hours to give to staff, you're always going to be looking at your staff who are under 2 years. And then from that group, you're going to be looking at staff with no sort of risk, no protected characteristics, that kind of thing. And then you need to let those staff go.
I mean, he is on a visa, but he's not sponsored. He's asked about sponsorship, and I've said it's unlikely. And now, obviously, with the work, it's not going to be likely. So it could just be that I say to him, look, there won't be a visa here, so I appreciate you're going to have to look elsewhere. And in which case, things may just change themselves anyway without me having to let him go.
Yes, but until they do, is your problem.
Yeah.
Whereas, so you might not have redundancy pay at this point. He might still request redundancy, which still means that you would need to you'd still have to make him redundant. They just won't be statutory redundancy pay. The rest of it you will still have to pay. But, I'm happy to discuss this with you offline. Okay. But if he's under 2 years, you may just need to have that conversation now and say, look, we've been doing this for 2 or 3 months. Doesn't look like the business is turning around. Unfortunately, I don't have the hours to give you in the future, and I have to end your contract. And you're able to do that, like I say, provided.
And I couldn't just say to him, well, look, I can put you on a part-time contract or put you on 0 hours contract.
No. I'm so sorry. But then you are changing his terms and conditions, and that's a much bigger problem.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So if you're wanting to change someone's terms and conditions, that is a much bigger problem. And that could lead you into things like, breach of contract and which is automatic unfair dismissal, and then it doesn't matter that he doesn't have 2 years and all of that. You just need to look at your business and look at the best option. And if the best option is to let this staff member go because you genuinely do not have the work for them now or in the near future, and you've been trying to make this work for a few months and you're not getting to the point where you have the work for them, then, because it also means that he can go and find a job somewhere else where maybe he could get sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. I haven't said to him, no, I won't sponsor you. So maybe that's my next step, because that might change anything anyway. Say, look, I'm sorry, I can't.
But it may or it may not.
Yeah, but it's worth a try, because that might have the effect I need anyway. So, okay, all right.
I mean, I don't think that should be plan A, but if you prefer that route, then...
Well, it's being honest. And I did say to him, I will let you know as soon as I know if I can offer you, but I can't see it coming. So therefore, I'm going to have to say to him. Otherwise, his visa ends in September. So he needs enough time to sort out a sponsored position. So really, I need to be telling him as soon as I know that I'm not going to sponsor him.
Yeah.
So, okay. All right. I'll maybe talk to you separately. But again, because cash flow's the issue, I'd need to know how much it would cost for like a 10-minute chat or something.
Okay. I can get Eve to let you know what the charges are. If you could just send that over.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anyone? Anything? No? Okay. Well, have a lovely afternoon and a lovely weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Next week, Carolyne will be back in this seat, which is great. It'd be lovely to hear her tiger stories. We know that she has seen tigers. So can't wait to hear the stories and see the pictures. See you guys next week. Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want a free peace of mind call with us to discuss your policies, handbook, and any burning staff issues in your business, click the link in the description below.